I've been in many different prisons, but I actually worked initially at Wormwood Scrubs and then to Strangeways. And when I was at Strangeways, I took umbrage with the system and decided to correct it. As you can see, the news story that was on the front page of the national press, and I led a virtual revolution against the POA, because the POA were in effect the management. I mean, you cannot have a chief officer running your trade union. But that is what the POA was in the 1970s, 1980s. So I said, there's no way, because I was studying at Manchester University and the government were paying for my course, but I couldn't get any time off. So I said, well, listen, I'm not going to do any overtime. And they said, oh, no, you will do overtime. It's compulsory overtime. Now, I went to see the trade union, the Prison Officers Association, and in charge of that was a principal officer, like an inspector. And he said, oh, no, that's the rule at this prison. We have compulsory overtime and you will do it. Try doing 60 hours a week at Strangeways and studying for a degree at the same time. How are you going to do it?
Impossible.
I tried, but eventually I just failed the exams. I mean, I couldn't sleep. And my wife I had a wife, of course, to look after and a child. And my grandfather took ill and he was staying at our house, I was nursing him. So it was impossible for me to commit the time to the studying. But it didn't do me any harm. And I made some good friends there, 2 solicitors who helped me form a trade union up against the POA. Because we said the POA were not independent. They were not an independent trade union. They were completely reliant upon the Home Office for their existence. They had no regional offices. They didn't pay for their own telephone calls. They had no regional bank accounts, no regional representation. They only had one office, and that was in London. And therefore, the argument was that this was not an independent trade union. This was, in effect, a tool of management.
So how many different prisons then, did you say, and how many years total?
Yeah, I did nearly 11 years.
Yeah.
I did nearly 2 years at Wormwood Scrubs. Then I was posted back to Strangeways because I got quite a great deal of trouble at the Scrubs, which was interesting,
We're going to get to all that.
Yeah.
So one of the interesting things in your videos I saw, you were working in the medical unit.
Yes. What happened was, they don't have it now, but in the 1970s, 1980s, they had what's known as the hospital service. So as a serving discipline officer, I could apply to be retrained as a hospital officer. So I was sent from Strangeways. I applied and passed the exams and what have you. Went to train at Walton Jail in Liverpool. And I did 3 months at the training school there, and I was seconded to the NHS for a period of time. Worked at Ashworth Secure Hospital for the criminally insane, and subsequently passed the exams to be a hospital officer. And I was stationed back at Strangeways as a hospital officer, not a discipline officer.
Because you verified something that people ponder about the UK prison system. So in America, prison assault, sexual assault, rape is so common, you have to go to a rape class to get taught how not to get raped. But you said they were coming in with the injuries, so you certified that it was happening in the UK prison system.
Talking about homosexual rape.
Yes.
Yeah, it was an irregular thing. It wasn't every week, but you would get inmates coming in, and they came into the clinic, because I ran a clinic in the hospital unit at Strangeways, and they would come in, and their initial contact would be through myself as the hospital officer, and they'd make the complaint that they'd been anally raped. The system that they used as a standard rule was that the aggressor would forcibly rape the victim and then make them defecate into pet newspaper. They're hiding the evidence, so that they
get rid of the DNA.
Get rid of the DNA, or attempt to get rid of the DNA, make them defecate into a newspaper, which they then folded up and threw it through the window, out the cell window. But of course, the victim had been damaged, and the people who came down I mean, you can imagine what's going to happen, can't you? They've been seriously damaged. You know, the rectum's been ripped, and a number of them will not, because you couldn't really treat it inside the hospital. So they were seen initially by me, then by a doctor, then transferred to outside hospitals, say Salford Royal Hospital, which was the usual procedure. So there was a number of that.
How many prisoners would actually come clean that they had been raped?
A lot of the inmates wouldn't say anything. You know what I mean? It's embarrassing, isn't it? You know, that they've been raped. And some of the people that were doing this, you'd be surprised. I mean, don't forget, although I'm working as a jailer, I'm just a human being, just a person. Just like the prisoners, they're people too, just people. And they are ashamed of being attacked and raped. But some of the rapists were notorious villains. I mean, people like Paul Sykes. It isn't very popular to talk about Paul Sykes as being a male rapist, but he certainly was helping himself to the young inmates in prison.
So we've got a lot of American viewers who may not have heard of Paul Sykes. Could you explain who that character was?
Paul Sykes was about 6'4" and about 17 stone. He was a very big, aggressive man, and he'd spent probably 20, 30 years of his adult life in prison. He'd fought for the heavyweight championship of Great Britain as a boxer against a man called John L. Gardner. And the style of Paul Sykes' boxing was, I'm big, I'm strong, take that. Except John L. Gardner could box, and he gave Paul Sykes a real dusting. You can look at it, have a look at it on YouTube. Type in John L. Gardner and Paul Sykes. That's Paul Sykes.
Yeah, I heard
So,
of this fella.
so you said he was a perpetrator of these assaults, Sykesy.
He was notorious for this. He had younger inmates. You know, he didn't like them. He couldn't get at them 18, 19, but he'd get them at 21, 22, and he used to take his pick of this. And he was notorious for actually physically bullying and attempted to bully staff. Now, he tried this at Strangeways jail. Now, there's lots of people who say, I'm too tough for Strangeways jail. Listen, all the time I worked there, I never saw anybody win. I mean, if you were really on that verge of actually intimidating staff, then you got introduced to the school bully, or the black dog, or Piggy, or what was he calling it, the Chinese money box. He used to get hold of you and twist your arm up your back. Yeah. Well, the staff D1 was the answer. And you got whipped down to D1. And if you misbehaved on D1, then they'd send for the hospital staff. And the hospital staff would go in, and you'd got clearance from a doctor, but you'd have a syringe full of Largactil or whatever, hold them down and inject them in the backside. We did that to Paul Sykes. He was quiet after that. As you might imagine.
Were some of the guards intimidated by him? Because he was known to just knock people out, wasn't he?
Oh, you knock them out, yeah. But if you've got three boys holding you, three big guys holding you down, and you got me with a syringe in your backside, you know you're going to be quiet for a bit, aren't you? He was quiet after that.
So how often would you say he assaulted young men?
Well, whenever he felt like it.
So very regular.
People daren't report him, you see, because he wasn't on his own. He had a series of friends that were backing him up. Villains, some of them quite well-known villains, and some from actual Liverpool, actually, who will go, I won't name them. I mean, don't want to start talking about people like... There we go. Slipped out, folks, yeah? Seriously, dangerous man.
So there was a guy called...
Yeah, his initials were... I won't name him, but he managed to get himself appointed as the red band cleaner on the young offenders wing in Strangeways. Now, the 1953 Prison Act stipulates that no inmate over the age of 21 may associate with young inmates. That's inmates, young prisoners, up to the age of 21. So they're kept separate. You know, they're protected, because otherwise they'd be bullied and abused. but they had a separate wing at Strangeways for this. And I was on that wing one day, and I saw this man, whose name, his initials are, and he was the red band cleaner. And he was aged at the time about 35. So I instantly recognised that he shouldn't be there. So I said, right, pack your gear and get off. Oh, no, he said, the principal officer has told me I'm to be the red band on this wing. I said, I'm not asking you to do this, I'm telling you. Pack your gear, you're moving. Now, either you do it voluntarily or I'll get a team in and we'll move you. Mumble, 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 mumble. Packed his gear up, and as we were going off the wing, the principal officer came out and started shouting at me, "What are you doing, Mr. Sutton? What are you doing here?" He said, "I've appointed him as the red band cleaner." And I said, you can't do this. It's a criminal offence. I said, but what I'm going to do is relocate him. And when I've relocated him in the adult section of the prison, then me and you can go and see the governor and you can tell him about how you are amending the 1953 Prison Act. How would you like that? What can you do? But then, who's going to do that? Everybody else was walking past and leaving this actively homosexual to help himself to the young offenders. And that is what he was doing. He was changing his cellmate every other day so he get his pick of the chickens, they called them. Seriously.
So why were they letting him get away with that?
Extremely rich man.
So they were paid off.
You know what the score is.
Corruption.
Multi-millionaire drug dealer. Yeah, I don't know how much he'd given to the staff, but he didn't have enough to give to me, I'll tell you, because I wasn't having it.
Why, I wondered, would the wing governor take him to his office at lunchtime in clear breach of prison rules? That was perhaps the start of my problems at the Scrubs. I was thinking and asking questions whilst the rest of the officers just accepted things the way they were. But I knew something was wrong here, and I felt sure, eventually discover exactly what. Shortly after 1 p.m, I saw the wing governor with the inmate next to him walking along the wands. "Officer, lock him up," he shouted to me, and the prisoner walked up the stairs to his cell. Opening the door, I asked him a direct question. "What on earth are you doing with the governor?" He was a typical East End villain, big build, over 200 pounds, cheeky smirk on his face, and a casually offensive tone. "I wouldn't ask if I were you, boss. Way above your pay grade." After locking him inside his door, I walked away wondering what on earth that was all about. But I would find out. I was determined to do that, as all my instincts told me that matters here needed to be looked at. I sensed the governor was up to no good. It just looked wrong. As I said, this incident was the start of my troubles, though at the time, I didn't know it, I'd crossed the path of a senior member of the Freemasons.